Hello everybody, I gave ye the 2012 Section A higher level question in the last few days, and I just want to go through the solution to it here. So what we're given, we were said that the graphic below shows a litter bin and the logo. The drawing on the right is a partially completed perspective view of the bin, and we're asked to complete the perspective drawing of the bin using an auxiliary vanishing point for the sloping surfaces. So the usual story, sum of the question done, find an auxiliary vanishing point, finish the question. Okay, so to start with, you need to put in the early lines that you were given. In other words, the lines that join to VP1 and the lines that join to VP2. So as I click in there through the question, the given information allows me to put in some of the roof surface, but not all of it. Now, they have asked us to use an auxiliary vanishing point to complete this question, even though it is quite easy to complete without it. So what we have to do though is find an auxiliary vanishing point for the slope of the bin. Now, this is an unusual question in that they have given us not the angle of the slope, but they have given us the angle of the top of the bin. You've already, see that green line that they're putting in there? That's already the angle of the bin. And actually, it's not a case of us setting up the triangle on the spectator in order to generate an auxiliary vanishing point and generate a height. We're working backwards. And by extending out that green line, it cuts through VP2, which is where our auxiliary vanishing point would have been put, and it allows us to find the auxiliary point through that method. So in other words, it's not the normal setup. It's here, look, we've given you the edge that includes the auxiliary vanishing point. Now you go figure out where is that point and complete the question then as a result. So once you have that though, it's very quick to complete. As I said, the two green lines go in and then you are into the position of joining points to spectator, projecting to plan, projecting from the picture plane down to the perspective view, and therefore completing the bin. Now, the one thing that happens with this question is a lot of kids forget to complete it fully. Okay, so there is a few lines and they're just after going in there on the inside of the bin, the part where you put your hand in order to generate or to drop in the rubbish. They need to be heavied in, as does the logo on the front of the bin. That also needs to be completed. And as a result, there is our final drawing. Time-wise, should take you no more than 10 minutes, probably less. But what you need to watch out for in this particular question, and I like it because it's unusual and it's something that could come up again, the fact that you're not told the slope needed for the auxiliary vanishing point, so you can't draw a triangle. You just have to extend on the lines they've given you in order to find that auxiliary vanishing point. Okay, so there we go. Let me just click through it again, sorry. All right. Okay, gone a bit mad there, am I clicking? Anyway, I'll put up a photo at the end just on the screen directly so that you can see that final solution. And remember, with these videos, you can pause and play them if you need to use them in order to help you do very detailed work. Okay, all right guys, so that's one question, and I also gave you a second question, so let me just sort that out now. Okay, so this was the other question I gave you, 2009, so the very first DCG exam paper, again, Section A higher level, which meant you were drawn onto the page. Now, the one thing I have noticed about the 2009 paper, and more so in subsequent years, is that to my mind, it was a more difficult paper. I think they have been, I won't say simplified, because you still have to know the same amount of stuff, but it's a lot clearer now what you're being asked to do. So this particular year, bear in mind, it was the first time this had been examined. And even the graphics you'll notice in that previous question were nicer than this particular question here. So anyway, look, we'll work through it and figure it out. So this time it said that you were given a 3D graphic which shows an arrangement of playing blocks, so kids playing blocks. The drawing on the right is a partially completed perspective view of the structure. Part A asks you to complete the perspective drawing of the base block and the underside of the triangular top, And part B, then determine an auxiliary vanishing point for the 30-degree sloping faces of the triangular block and complete the drawing. Okay, so the first thing I noticed there is, to be honest, there's no need for A and B. They could have said just as easy, complete the perspective drawing of the block using auxiliary vanishing points and then writing down that 30 degrees was the angle of the sloping faces. But anyway, so they've told us that the red triangular block at the top, the angle in that is 30 degrees. What do we do, or how do we go about this? So it's the usual story. The start of these questions tends to be the same. We need to use the building itself or the base or what they've given us to generate a perspective. Now over here behind the green screen or the green piece on the page or on the video is the green represents the picture plane. So there's our picture plane and it's touching off the corner at the front of that block. And they're just showing you, well, physically this is what's happening when we're trying to draw perspective. We are generating and trying to find our vanishing points. Now they had given us our vanishing points. So what's over here on the left is an explanation, but what's happening on the right is what you would draw on the exam. So you'd extend back your points to the vanishing point. Now what was tricky in this one at the start was the fact that we needed to find the base of that block. So that first blue line went in, and then the second one attached to VP2. And then when you were at that stage, you were able to continue on. Okay, and it's continue on in the same way as we've always done, which is, to my mind, relatively easy. Okay, so part A there is done. There is the perspective of the base block, the blue block and the yellow block. Now we're moving on to creating an auxiliary vanishing point, and again they're showing you here in the graphic how that will work and what needs to be done and so on. So in order to start it off, I still need to draw the outline of the base of that triangular block. So this is nothing yet to do with the auxiliary part of it. This is literally just drawn the outline of the block, extending back and touching every point that we've been given. So what happens then though is for the sloped lines, they must vanish to a different vanishing point, to this auxiliary vanishing point. So how do we find it? Well, they're found by drawing a line from the spectator at the same angle of the line that needs vanishing. Remember what I said to you in the early days of this? I said the vanishing points and the auxiliary vanishing point, and an ordinary vanishing point is considered at a height that is the same height as the spectator. I said it was the eyeballs, the height of the eyeballs, basically where you're looking. And then I said, but if you imagine, in order to see the slope, the spectator literally has to turn and look up. So kind of turn his eyeballs and look up at what angle, look up at 30 degrees. So we're trying to figure out what is the angle required. So over there again in the graphic, they're showing you, there's the top of the spectator. The spectator has gone from looking along the red lines there, which is the height he or she is at, to looking at an angle of 30 degrees. So this triangle gets created, and the triangle, and the important thing about the triangle is it has to have an angle of 30 degrees, but also it has to be a right angle, because we're trying to figure out if the person is looking up, when their view gets to the picture plane, what height is that right angle triangle. Okay, so what we do is we extend a line from the plan of the vanishing point, because it's located on the picture plane, parallel to the edge of the solid. So here's our 30-degree triangle. Now, that looks slightly different to, no, actually it's the same as the ones I drew with you in the last few classes, just the angles are different. The key here is that the blue line is there anyway. It's the original line used to set up the original vanishing point 2. Then you create the 30-degree angle on top of it, that's your red line there, and then finish off the right angle triangle, and the right angle must always be at the picture plane. That's what generates that green height, and it's that is important. That green height is what we need. The green height then is marked above vanishing point 2. Why vanishing point 2 and not vanishing point 1? Because we created our triangle on vanishing point 2. That's the one that we used. So what happens then, and because this roof is up and down, it's angled in 2 directions. Now you wouldn't need these 2 auxiliary vanishing points to find the solution, but it just makes it a little bit faster. So what you would do is you'd mark the height above vanishing point 2 and below vanishing point 2, and then you vanish them back using your plan, again joining to spectator, we're across the picture plane, and lo and behold, your 2 points get vanished back like so. Now, that line that just went in there, that green line, you didn't need the auxiliary vanishing point to do that because we already knew where the edge of the block was. So one auxiliary vanishing point would have been perfectly, oh, sugar, much again. 1 point would have been perfectly useful there, or necessary, or only necessary. Sorry, let me just build up again to that last bit. These always finish before I'm ready to finish talking. Okay, so auxiliary vanishing point, green height marked above and marked below. Point vanishes back. Lo and behold, we have a roof segment, and there we go. Okay, so there is our perspective view of that question. If you want to see, by the way, the marking schemes for any of those 4 questions, it's in examinations.ie. They're all worth, are they worth 20 marks each or 25? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look at it, but generally in the short question section, most kids pick up a decent amount of marks. If you're able to do it, you'll get full marks. There kind of seems to be very little in between. But that's the end of our question. All right, guys, thank you. I'll talk to you again.